It's the worst form of medical neglect I've ever seen. Let that sink in for a second. That is a direct quote from Dr. Ewell Bickham. He's the coroner who walked into what looked like a completely ordinary home, only to be hit by a scene that honestly just defies human comprehension. You know, first responders are trained to handle tragedy, right? To process the unthinkable. But what they found in this particular living room, it absolutely horrified even the most seasoned veterans. So today's explainer investigates a crime scene that's going to force us to look at the absolute darkest corners of human responsibility. Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to our clinical, objective breakdown of the Lacey Fletcher tragedy. We're going to completely bypass the sensationalized internet rumors today and rely purely on the forensic data, the timelines, and the court records to understand exactly what happened here. Because ultimately, this is a story about the devastating consequences of isolation, medical neglect, and the terrifying reality of what can happen behind closed doors. Our timeline anchors on January 3, 2022, in a quiet, tight-knit town called Slaughter, Louisiana. It's a small community, right? Population of less than 1,000 people. The kind of place where neighbors know each other, they look out for one another. Police were called to this incredibly well-kept, totally normal-looking home on Tom Drive. But inside, the reality was anything but normal. Right in the center of the living room, they discovered 36-year-old Lacey Fletcher deceased. And she hadn't just passed away on the couch, she had literally melted into it. Her body was fused to the furniture.
Section 1. The Fletcher Family. Public Pillars versus Private Horrors.
To even begin to understand how something like this happens, we have to look at the environment. And this brilliantly illustrates the jarring double life of Sheila and Clay Fletcher. On one side, we have the very definition of respected community pillars. Sheila was an active town alderman, essentially the vice mayor, and a court clerk. Clay worked with the Civil War Historical Society. I mean, these were the people you went to for help. But look at the private reality. They were walking past their own daughter, completely ignoring her as she rotted away in their living room for over a decade. The very people employed to uphold justice and community standards were harboring this horrific secret. So, how did Lacey end up there? Let's walk through this timeline together. Neighbors actually remember Lacey at age 15 as this vibrant, sweet teenager. She loved Disney movies, she played volleyball, she was seen exercising outside with these small dumbbells. But then, at age 16, things shifted. She was diagnosed with autism, and her parents suddenly pulled her out of public school to be homeschooled. Fast forward to age 23, in 2010, her parents walked into a doctor's office, without her, mind you, claiming she was suffering from severe social anxiety and had become completely reclusive, refusing to leave the couch. And then, a full 13 years later, at age 36, she's discovered deceased. She had slipped entirely through society's cracks.
Section 2. The Medical Reality. Debunking the Internet Myths.
Now, when this case first broke, the internet just exploded with false theories. The most prominent myth was that Lacey suffered from locked-in syndrome, which is a rare neurological disorder where a patient is fully conscious but completely paralyzed, unable to speak or move anything except their eyes. People just naturally assumed this was the only way she could have been stuck there, but we need to definitively debunk this right now. The coroner and medical reports confirmed she did not have this syndrome. She had full use of her arms, she could swallow, and she actually possessed the motor functions required to move. She was absolutely not physically locked in by a neurological disease.
Which honestly makes this next number all the more staggering. 12. That is the estimated number of years the medical examiner believes Lacey sat in that exact same spot on the couch, just sitting there, surrounded by a portable toilet, baby powder, and clean clothes she never even put on. 12 years, completely immobilized.
Let's move to the next point and see how this builds, because the physiological reality of being immobilized for that long is just a horrific cascade of medical failures. Step 1. Because she wasn't getting up to use the restroom, she sat in her own acidic waste, and that causes severe chemical burns and skin irritation within hours. Step 2. The constant pressure cuts off oxygen to the tissues, creating massive bed sores. At the same time, extreme muscle atrophy permanently locks the legs into a defensive, paralyzed position. So at this point, she literally couldn't stand up even if she tried. Step 3. The tissue dies. This exposes the bone, causing deep bone infections and gangrene. And finally, Step 4. These massive, untreated open wounds invite catastrophic bacterial infections, which inevitably lead to fatal sepsis.
But here is a truly shocking medical fact that kind of explains how she survived for 12 years in this state. The autopsy actually revealed severe insect infestation. Maggots were actively consuming her dead, necrotic tissue while she was still alive. Clinically speaking, these maggots were keeping the decaying wounds clean of dead tissue, and ironically, that actually prolonged her life by preventing fatal sepsis from taking hold much earlier. It's a really grotesque reality of just how hard her body fought to survive.
Section 3. The alibi versus the autopsy, when the evidence speaks for the victim.
Now, what's really interesting about this comparison is how quickly science dismantles fiction. At this critical juncture, we have to weigh the parents' official statements against the undeniable forensic evidence. Sheila Fletcher actually told police that on the night before Lacey died, she made her daughter half a sandwich and some Cheetos, painting this picture of a peaceful final night. But the autopsy utterly destroyed this fabricated alibi. The medical examiner found absolutely no food in her system, none. Her stomach contained only couch cushion foam and human feces. Whether she ate it out of severe starvation or was fed it, the evidence is absolute.
I want to just pause for a second and let this heavy quote from the official coroner's report sink in. She was literally tortured and rotted in her own body. That is the ultimate, inescapable conclusion of the medical examination. This was not some overnight tragedy. It was a decade-long degradation.
The official causes of death laid the direct foundation for the criminal charges. As you can see, she died from severe sepsis, stemming from chronic malnutrition and acute starvation. At 36 years old, she weighed just 96 pounds. This was combined with immobility, massive ulcer formation, and deep bone infections. These aren't just medical terms we're throwing around. They are the undeniable forensic proof of profound, catastrophic neglect.
Section 4. Theories and explanations. How does this happen?
So how does the family just allow this to happen? Well, while we may never know Lacey's exact mental state, investigators and medical professionals point to 3 scientifically and legally plausible explanations. First, untreated extreme agoraphobia. If her social anxiety spiraled without any medical intervention, her safe space may have shrunk over time until it was literally just that couch. Second is caregiver burnout leading to catastrophic denial. The theory here is that the parents became overwhelmed by her needs, resented her, and simply stopped caring, ignoring the problem until it became a lethal reality. And third, the most sinister theory, physical restraint early on. The idea that she was forced onto that couch until her leg muscles atrophied, permanently trapping her there physically. Whatever the catalyst actually was, the result was a slow-motion tragedy.
Section 5. The final verdict. Justice for Lacey Fletcher.
Ultimately, the autopsy gave prosecutors exactly what they needed to shift this from a medical mystery to a full-blown criminal investigation. Sheila and Clay Fletcher were initially indicted by a grand jury for second-degree murder. However, as we often see, the legal reality involves compromise. Rather than facing a jury for murder, the parents eventually pleaded no contest, accepting a plea deal for manslaughter.
So, the crucial point here is the sentencing. 40 years. For their staggering negligence, the judge sentenced Sheila and Clay Fletcher to 40 years in prison. It was a severe penalty, for sure, but one reflecting the unparalleled severity of the medical neglect they allowed to happen right in their very own living room.
But while the legal case is technically closed, the broader questions, those are still wide open. I want to leave you with this to think about. How does a close-knit community, a place where everyone supposedly knows everyone, allow a vulnerable person to just vanish in plain sight for 15 years? It really forces us to ask how well we actually know our neighbors and what our responsibility is when someone just quietly fades away. Think about that, and we'll see you in the next explainer.